good evening, good afternoon. This is your girl, Jodi ASMR. And tonight we are going to be reading about and discussing cryptids and the legends that surround them. So sit back, relax, grab your favorite blanket, curl up in your favorite chair, and prepare to enjoy yourself. But before we start, if you would not mind hitting that subscribe button in the right hand corner, I would truly appreciate it. I appreciate all of your support. Everyone who watches my videos and comes to my channel for the first time and comes back to my channel, I love you all so much and appreciate you more than you know. So after this, the cryptids, I'm going to do glitch in the matrix and creepy facts first, and then glitch in the matrix. So here we go with cryptids. Now there are legends surrounding cryptids. They are creatures often unseen and mysterious. There's usually a urban legend around them where many people have claimed to see them. Now, they're usually passed down from generation to generation. A lot of the cryptid stories and legends are in the heritage of the people that believe in them. And when they believe, it's a deep-seated belief. And it is real, whether you believe it or not. It is real. And it is their reality that it is real. So no matter what you think, one way or another, about cryptids, perspective is key. They're elusive, mysterious beings that can haunt your nightmares. Come in the middle of the night, you've got to be careful saying their name. They may be thought as mythical, or beings whose existence cannot be proven by science, but if you think about it, isn't that God? And we have faith in God and things like that. So why is this any different? In my opinion, completely in my opinion, they can be found in almost every culture in the world, from the Loch Ness Monster in Scotland to the Chupacabra in Latin America. 10 cryptids are the most common. We're going to start with Barghest. This is a ghostly, haunting black dog cryptid that appears in the folklore of Yorkshire and Lancashire, England. Is often associated with misfortune, and sightings of this ominous creature continue to be reported year after year. It has fangs of the most horrific cannibal you could even imagine. Long, sharp fangs with a flat nose and deep-seated eyes that are evil and close together, haunting. Sharp claws and long black fur with a very statuesque and muscular physique. Sharp, pointy ears and a jawline been known in the UK's folklore. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's eerie Sherlock Holmes story, The Hound of the Baskervilles, is rooted from this cryptid. The first appearance of Sirius Black in his shape-shifting form in the Harry Potter series has pervaded popular culture over centuries. Now, it is not just Barkest. It has many different names, as so many stories are about this being. And it is well known as the omen of death. In Yorkshire, it is referred to as the Barkest, Barkests, Barquest. Now, according to the Merriam-Webster Dictionary or Encyclopedia of Literature, the Barkest was part of the lore in northern England, and particularly Yorkshire. It was a monstrous goblin dog with huge teeth and claws that only appeared at night. It was believed that those who saw one clearly would die soon after seeing this, while those who caught only a glimpse would live on, but would eventually die shortly after, possibly only living 3 to 6 months after seeing this demon. The demon of Didsworth, the black dog of Winchester, the Badfoot of Wakefield, and the Barkest of Burnley are all related apparitions. Their Welsh counterparts were red-eyed Gilwig, the dog of darkness, the dogs of hell. In Lancaster, the monster was called Trash Skriker or Striker. In East Anglia, the dog had only one eye and was known as Black Shock or Shock. The Manchester Barkest was said to be headless. The Barkest appears in Charlotte Bront's Jane Eyre, in which the title character recalls hearing tales of a creature called Gandrush. Now, a North of England spirit, quote-unquote, in the form of a horse, mule, or large dog. So there are many ways to see this creature, many ways to describe it, but it is big, scary, and evil, and does bring an omen and a potential prophecy of death to the ones who directly see it, and a possibility of dying within months if you get a glimpse. The Prose, Brute, and Other Late Medieval Chronicles. Now, this is a book, and in their histories, essays in honor of Lister Matheson, a collection that focuses on tales recorded in England in the 14th and 15th centuries and beyond. He was also described as a headless man. However, there are other possibilities. The headless man is a Barkest, sometimes referred to as and spelled as Barquest or Bargeist or Boquest. These are creatures primarily associated with north of England, Northumberland, Durham, Yorkshire, and Lancashire. They assume all at will the form of a headless man, a headless lady, a white cat, a rabbit, a dog, or a black dog. So as you can see, there are many depictions of what a Barkest, Barquist, or Bargeist is. But it is always a dark death omen. The Barkest is a fiend that is attached to a particular place. not an isolated piece of land, a wooded area, or wasteland. The Barghest is known as a portent of disaster or a death for those who see it. It is also speculated that death may not visit the person who sees the Barghest but could kill a family member instead. Medieval and post-medieval northern folklore records show that if one approaches or touches a Barghest, a wound is inflicted on the person, and the wound will never heal, continuing to fester with rot. In 1578, in Suffolk, a clergyman published his account of a fearsome beast referred to as Black Shuck by the people of the region. In his pamphlet titled A Strange and Terrible Wonder, he wrote, quote, "There appeared in a most horrible similitude and likeness to the congregation then and there present a dog, as they might discern it, of a black color. This black dog, or devil dog, in such a likeness, passed between two persons as they were kneeling upon their knees, and occupied in prayer, as it seemed, wrung the necks of them, brought that one instant clean backward, in so much that even at a moment where they kneeled, they strangely died." Now, there are many movies, and I think this is even where, and maybe you can agree or disagree with the werewolf legend, it really derives from the fangs to the crippling of a person, but not necessarily associated with the omen of death. Werewolves are a little bit different, but they do bring on chaos and destruction and death. Now, the Suffolk Folk Archives contextualize the 1578 report. The 4th of August, 1577, a terrible storm was raging. The black sky and thunder rolled. Fleming reported that a black devil dog entered the church, killing 2 people and wounded a 3rd. Black Shuck, the devil dog, has survived in the popular culture until this day, bringing in to also punish naughty children. They are warned to behave lest old Shuck comes to get them. And Lowestoft's finest brand, The Darkness, started their #1 album with Black Shuck. Local businesses, events, and locations are still named after the black dog, and local people are still motivated to report sightings of this creature. Now, whether you believe in this or not, whether this is part of your culture or not, either way, these people have fear in them because of this. So it has to come from somewhere. It has to be derived in such a fashion that some sightings of such a creature must have been true to really infiltrate this deep-seated terror in these people. I mean, that things don't come from nothing. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote, quote, "The Hound of the Baskervilles," a haunting Sherlock Holmes story in 1901, which could have been based on the local legend of a spectral hound that haunted Dartmoor in Devonshire, England. The victim of the story is Sir Charles Baskerville. This man is found dead with his face twisted in horror, and the giant paw prints of a hound were spotted near his corpse. creature we are familiar with, but it's something bigger and more pronounced, more violent, more fearful. Now, the folklore of the British Isles is, in fact, littered with legends of phantom dogs known as black dogs, black devil dogs by professional folklorists. Whatever color they happen to be, there are still black dog lanes and black dog inns in villages all over the map. Most of these dogs are fairly benign creatures which warn of impending disaster, haunt a location where something nasty happened to their owner or their owner's family, just like a benevolent spirit lingers sometimes behind with a desire to scare or something to prove. Many seem to have been supporters of the Stuarts, and especially King Charles I. One of them was a ghostly bloodhound from the Morden Hampstead that snuffed about in a ditch opposite a pub, hunting for spilled beer. Theo Brown, a distinguished West Country folklorist affiliated to the University of Exeter, who spent much of her adult life making a vast collection of black dog stories, reckoned that, quote, "The hound of the Baskervilles does not correspond with any of the black dogs known thus far, and it is probably a hot pot of several," unquote. A reworking of the usual commemorative or haunting function into something considerably more vicious and sinister. So Conan Doyle also acknowledged one source for the inspiration for the hound in his preface to later collection of his stories. He said in June 1929, "The hound of the Baskervilles arose from a remark by that fine fellow whose premature death was a loss to the world, Fletcher Robinson, that there was a spectral dog near his house on Dartmoor. That remark was the inception of the book, but I should add that the plot and every word of the actual narrative was my own," unquote. So while today's culture or theoretical pop culture appears to use this Barghest and its associated hounds frequently as sources of inspiration, we do not know someone who actually died simply after seeing the creature. But how would you know, per se, unless they actually knew what they were looking at or told somebody? A lot of people brush it off, like the Mothman. Think about those stories. I do believe that those people who didn't know each other in the Mothman prophecies did see the same thing. How would they even draw, explain, or comprehend such a creature in so many different places, not knowing each other? I mean, that's just impossible. So when more than one person has the exact same description of something, and they don't know each other, and they've never heard of any of these prophecies, I start to wonder. And they die, or something bad does happen that they predict. I do have to wonder if some of these stories are not riddled in truth, and we just don't want to accept it. I don't know. So, British folklore, Britannica, is where I'm reading this from. And the story behind have been reported around the village of Mawana, Smith in Cornwall, adding an eerie twist to local legend. So let's talk about the Owlman. This reminds me of the Mothman. So from Wikipedia, let's start with that. The Cornish folklore, the Owlman, sometimes referred to as the Cornish Owlman or the Owlman of Mawana, is an owl-like humanoid creature said to have been seen since 1976 in the town of Mawana, Cornwall, UK. Now this is pretty. It's a baby cryptid, I would say. 1976 was not that long ago. So if we think about it, alright, well, what happened? Was there anything that happened in this village? The Owlman is sometimes compared to the American Mothman legend from the mid-60s. However, a Eurasian eagle owl is likely the source of the legend. But where did the whole story of the Owlman originate from? Well, it started when an investigative reporter, Tony Doc Shales, reported on two young girls who were on holiday in Monan who saw a large winged creature hovering above the tower of St. Monan, and I hope I'm saying that correctly, Monan, and St. Stephen's Church on April 17th, 1976. Now, most versions of the story, the girls identified as June and Vicky Melling. They were so horrified, petrified, and frightened of this sighting. They see a large feather birdman that their father, Don, immediately cut short their family holiday after listening to their sighting and seeing how frightened and terrified these two girls were. Now, according to this investigative reporter, one of the girls provided him with a drawing of the creature, which he dubbed the Owlman. So subsequently, this story related in a pamphlet entitled Morgower, The Monster of Falmouth Bay by Anthony Mountain-Beller. Now this circulated throughout Cornwall in 1976. Now this is all according to Shales. Owlman was reported again on July 3rd by two 14-year-old girls identified as Sally Chapman and Barbara Perry. But this is within months of each other. Now, they were aware of the Owlman tale according to the story. The two girls were camping when they confronted a big owl with pointed ears as big as a man with glowing eyes and black pincher-like claws. Now, that is really the last sighting for a while, until 1978. So, circulation of this Owlman and sporadically appeared in 1976, 78, 79, 89, and 95. According to legend, a loud owl-like sound could be heard at night in the Mullion churchyard during the year 2000 as well. Now, what could be the explanation in the logical mind, right? Everybody wants to always tear apart these sightings and say, well, you must have seen a specific animal that is not native to the area or something. Oh, they blamed it on the church sighting of a Eurasian eagle owl as a likely source of the legend as well. Well, but what happened? I mean, is it backed by anything that happened to these girls? Or it may just have been a hoax? No, Midway noted that witnesses claiming encounters with a similar legendary monster promoted by Shales were either Dr. Shales or friends of Dr. Shales or relatives, or reported their sightings to this man and to no one else, or else wrote letters describing what they had seen to newspapers and were never interviewed by anybody in particular. It is also considered the death of Raptor. It is known to feed at midnight. But why? But I want to know why. See, to me, that doesn't correlate really with anything horrific, and I do believe that the cryptids are associated with disease, death, tragedy, something big that happens that creates a lot of death in me. I believe that cryptids are just, that they're actually real when they're designed more out of convenience. Is what I'm trying to say. Or for just, a local legend. That's why I find this one harder to believe than what's going to the Now this is really terrifying to me. My dad remembers this specific tragedy happening back in '66. The West Virginian folklore, the Mothman is a humanoid creature, dark, black, large, wingspan with red eyes that comes into your vision from the darkness and eats into your brain. Now, but there is a specific story in Point Pleasant. All these people saw the Mothman. All these people had similar accounts. They had visions. They had horrible headaches. Some of them died mysterious deaths out of nowhere. Now this was between November 15th, 1966 and December 15th, 1967. It was only a month that people saw this. However, the first newspaper report was published in the Point Pleasant Register, dated November 16th, 1966, titled "A Couple Sees Man-Size Creature." So the national press soon picked up on the reports and helped spread the story across the U.S. So the source of the legend is believed to have originated from the sightings of Eurasian sand-owl cranes or herons, but you wouldn't see them flying at night. It may have been dark, but it wouldn't. Their eyes are not red. They're not going to fly into your car. I mean, we had a lot of sand-owl cranes in Florida, and they're pretty loud, but they're very social. They don't just fly away, and they're very pretty birds. I mean, I had one walk right into my house almost. I had to close the door. It was so curious. They're very nice birds. They're not attack birds. They are just loud sometimes, and yes, sometimes early in the morning or later at night they'll be nesting or calling each other, but anybody who would see one would know it was a bird. It would not just fly 6, 2 young couples from Point Pleasant, West Virginia. Roger and Linda Scarberry and Steve and Mary Millett told police they saw a large black creature whose eyes glowed red standing at the side of the road near the T&D area. The site, former World War II munitions plant. Linda Scarberry described as a slender, muscular man, 7 feet tall with white wings, and said that she was unable to discern its face due to the hypnotic effects that this thing had on her by her looking into his eyes. Distressed, the witness drove away at high speed and said the creature flew after their car. Neither one of those birds do that. It'd make a screeching sound. It pursued them as far as Point Pleasant city limits. Both herons and sandhill cranes are not known for they're big birds. They're not going to fly long distances chasing after a car. And they're not ever alone. A sandhill crane who is alone is usually a baby who has lost his parents, and you will see them hit on the side of the road because they are so kind of lackadaisical, easygoing birds. Like I said before, they're not attack birds. I saw one on 95 just in the middle of 95 with no parents, just walking around looking back and forth. I called the Wildlife Society down there, and they went and got it because they told me that it was probably at an orphan, had actually lost his parents, that it was not or a sandhill crane, and it was a baby, would be by itself. So this couple said whatever this was pursued them to Point Pleasant city limits. During the next few days, other people, unknown to this couple by the way, reported similar sightings, almost identical to what this couple had seen. Local newspapers reported it. 2 volunteer firemen who saw it said it was a large bird with red eyes. But it wasn't just large. They said it was over 7 foot tall. Now these are firefighters. Mason County Sheriff George Johnson commented that he believed the sightings were due to an unusual large heron. He termed a shite-poke. No. I've lived around herons. I've seen them born. There's not unusually large herons. I mean, herons are large in themselves, but not unusually large, that it would be terrifying. Contractor Newell Partridge told Johnson that when he aimed a flashlight at a creature in the nearby field, its eyes glowed like bicycle reflectors. Now that could be a bird, I guess. But that would be a huge, I mean, if you think bicycle reflectors and think how big they are, that is a big eye. That is not a normal size of any bird known in, other than prehistoric times. I mean, which could be possible, but that wouldn't be in 1966. Additionally, he blamed the buzzing noises from his television set and the disappearance of his German Shepherd on the creature. Now, wildlife biologist Robert Smith at West Virginia University told reporters that the descriptions and sighting all fit, quote-unquote, the sandhill crane. Yes, it is almost as tall as a person standing up, but not a 7-foot-tall person. Saying the bird may have wandered out of its migration route, but if so many people saw it, they could describe it because a sandhill crane has a bright red head, a long brown neck and body. It's not gonna, like I said, it's not gonna just flee quickly. I mean, somebody could stand there and watch it. It's not gonna pursue anything. They would just be outside my house. I could walk almost right up to them, and if I got close, they would just kind of scoot away. Unless you ran at them, they were not gonna fly anywhere. has little tiny eyes. They're not the size of bicycle reflectors. But here's the thing. People would tell of this disaster that was going to happen after they saw this creature. It wasn't like it was just a random, weird paranormal sighting. The Mothman prophecies actually resulted in their prophecies or thoughts, intuitions, whatever you want to call it, being true. That they had predicted the collapse on December 15th, 1967 of the Silver Bridge where 46 people died. The incident connected the Mothman sightings to the bridge collapse by the reports of what these people said. Now, Mothman is not just a cryptid that has been seen in one place in the world, and all the sightings of the Mothman are so identical and related to a tragedy or something that is going to happen, and people prophesize or they can foresee this tragedy coming. Whether it's 6 months or a year in the future, it eventually is connected to what those people said. Now, in Georgia, Russia, a UFOologist claimed that Mothman sightings in Moscow foreshadowed the 1999 Russian apartment bombings. These were a series of explosions that hit 4 apartment blocks in the Russian cities of Bryansk, Moscow, and Donsk. I hope I said that right. In September 1999, killing more than 300 people, injuring more than 1,000, and spreading a wave of fear across the country. The bombings, together with the invasion of Dagestan, triggered their second Chechen war. So, the handlings of the crisis by Putin, who was prime minister at the time, boosted his popularity greatly and helped him attain the presidency within a few months. But these Mothman sightings, all of these people predicted that this was going to happen. That's the thing. So this is why I really find the Mothman to be quite terrifying as a cryptid, because there's so much death and devastation and prediction associated with it. In 2016, WCHS TV published a photo purported to be of a Mothman taken by an anonymous man while driving on Route 2 in Mason County. So again, this scientist says, oh, it's just a bird, an owl, carrying a frog or a snake away. I don't believe that. Because even though she says there's reasonable explanations, there's no reasonable explanation on how somebody could see this, many people could see this, and predict a horrific event, killing more than 46 people. And in Russia, 300, injuring 1,000. So, this is what drives me crazy. Now, there are some cryptids that I am not as convinced on, but the Mothman, everyone wants to brush it off or explain it away, but I don't think you can brush the Mothman off so quickly. It is noted that in 1966, the recount of 67 Mothman reports state that at least 100 people saw Mothman, with many more afraid to report their sightings. Now, observe that written sources for such considered of children's books are sensationalized or undocumented accounts that fail to, quote, identify persons. But there are found elements in common of the Mothman reports and much older Mothman tales, suggesting that something real may have triggered the scares and become woven with existing folklore. Yeah, things happened after people would see this. People would die from weird brain aneurysms that, all at once. That doesn't make sense. Have horrible headaches, have the same symptoms of sickness. And only the people that saw it. Of course, with any kind of cryptid sighting or documentation, there's going to be your fair share of hoaxes. But I do believe that the Mothman, the thing is that there are real sightings that accounted for predictions and prophecies of real tragedies. Moving on to the Cryptid of the Sea. Now these are scary because there's so much of the ocean we have not discovered, even though it's said to have been charted and most of the waters to be documented and everything to be. No, we have not gone so deep as to find every single species of life that lives deep within our oceans, and especially up in the northern Arctic Sea. There are some seriously scary things that happen out at sea, I do believe, in the cold, dark depths of those beautiful blue, icy Arctic waters. What is one of the cryptids? The kraken, or kraken. It's a sea monster of enormous size that appear in the sea between Norway and Iceland. Unconfirmed cephalopod. It's a member of the molluscan class. Now, it is related to a squid, octopus, cuttlefish, or nautilus. These exclusive marine animals are characterized by bilateral body symmetry, a prominent head instead of arms or tentacles. Now, we don't know. There's giant squid out there that will swallow you up that are enormous. That's the thing. There could be some true... yes, it seems like a monster, but these are true terrors of the ocean. The colossal octopus. The kraken, the subject of sailors' superstitions and myths, was first described in the modern era by Francesco Negri in 1700. This description was followed in 1734 by an account from a Dano-Norwegian missionary and explorer, Hans Eget, who described the kraken in detail, equated it with the Guva of medieval lore. However, the first description of the creature is usually credited by Norwegian Bishop Pandopidian. So, is an octopus that is tremendous in size, enormous, huge. It is known for pulling down ships to the depths of the icy Arctic. So, do I believe that there is something mysterious out there that lies in the dark, cold seduction. There's so much power of energy that is fluctuates in and out of that part of the world. I do believe that there is something strange that lurks in the night, in the dark. That all these accounts at sea are just not just arbitrary accounts that mean nothing, or innocuous sightings that weren't terrifying, that were just folklore of the dark evilness of the sea. I think there is something out there. It may not be the kraken, but there is definitely something sinister that lays out there in that cold, deep, dark water, the Arctic Sea. How about the water leaper? Now, I have not heard of these. These are different than I'm familiar with. So let's start with Wikipedia and go from there. It is a Welsh folklore that lived in swamps and ponds. It is a huge frog with bat's wings. And why not? Why couldn't something hybridize and be made of two creatures that have grown into something insidious and scary and angry? And why not? Why is that so impossible? That attacks people, that cross its path. It is a lizard-like animal, long tail, no hind legs. It has a stinger at the end. It jumps across the water using its wings, hence its name. It was blamed for problems ranging from snapping fishing lines to eating livestock or even fishermen. So I've never heard of this, but it's kind of blown off as fairies, goblins, brownies, bookies, and other supernatural creatures in a book. It isn't really taken all that seriously because, again, it's not connected to a tragedy, something horrible, or a prophecy. That's why the Mothman is so intriguing to me. That is one of my most, the cryptid that haunts my mind the most. And of course, the Wendigo. Now, what is the difference, some people may ask, between a skinwalker, a Wendigo, a doppelganger? Well, in my beliefs, the Wendigo can kill. It is of a demon nature. The skinwalker is usually native beliefs that is a old medicine man that has gone to dark magic, like a witch doctor, that instead of practicing white magic goes into the dark depths of the black magic world and actually has to give up part of his soul. Now, I do believe in those, and I do believe in the Wendigo, and there are some crazy tales behind the Wendigo. They inhabit remote forests, desolate areas, particularly during winter. They are considered malevolent, bring death and misery to those who encounter them. What do they do? Well, it is believed that they can kill and eat their victims. Now, some legends have humans transforming into Wendigos because of their greed or weakness, but I associate those with more of the skinwalker. Under the Canadian Encyclopedia, how they have, it is a supernatural being belonging to the spiritual traditions of Algonquian speaking First Nations in North America. essentially cautionary tales about isolation and selfishness and importance of community. Yes, but that doesn't really then jive with the fact that the Wendigo will come into a community and infect it as a whole. And not all accounts of the Wendigo, yes, Skinwalker, but Wendigo is actually different in the fact that it is not necessarily believed that it is associated always with a human that is gone astray because of his greed or weakness. I believe, and this is my personal thought on the Wendigo, that they are an energy that is so evil and dark that go through the forest of the north, that there is some kind of portal or something that lets this evil in, that it seeks out those who are not truly believers and need to be shown otherwise. And I do believe it is an energy that is readily and readily available. It can be called upon. It is hard to get rid of. Now, some legends say that Wendigos have pointed animal-like ears with antlers, horns sprouting on their humanoid head with some kind of glowing energy coming through their soul eyes. Their eyes are always ice blue, sunken, sharp, pointy teeth, extremely bad breath, and horrific death body odor. Like they're just kept in this state of decay and death. Now, they have exceptional eyesight, or at least credited with it, hearing and sense of smell. They're said to move with the speed of the wind and have the ability to walk across the deep snow or open water without sinking. Now, in some legends, a Wendigo can be killed by a conventional weapon, club, or firearm. Other legends claim the Wendigo has to be subdued and its icy heart cut out and melted into a roaring fire. And other legends claim that only a knowledgeable First Nations spiritual leader, a shaman, can dispatch a Wendigo with a specific spell and ceremony. That is where I tend to fall in the beliefs that it actually has to be expelled, the energy has to be terminated in some way, or cut off from that area to save whoever is infected with its darkness. Now, Wendigos are just not in northern America. So, in a report to his superiors in Paris in 1636, Lejeune wrote, "This devilish woman added that the Wendigo had eaten some indigenous tribes, people that live north of the river that is called Three Rivers, and that he would eat a great many more of them if he were not called elsewhere. But that was a werewolf and would come in his place to devour them, even up to the French fort that he would slaughter the French themselves." And the Wendigo is always associated with death, war, evil, possession, also be found on the western frontier in the 1800s. Now, I believe this is more of the skinwalker type, but not in all cases. So in some cases, community members, relatives of the accused killed the suspected Wendigo as a precaution. So there had to be proof that this thing was killed and brought to the people. I'm just saying that not all cryptid stories are of folklore or untruths. Some of them are extremely scary. Now there are some 20th century ideas that find way into the Western medical vocabulary of the Wendigo. It was used by early psychiatrists to refer to a mental condition in which patients felt possessed by cannibalistic desires. Well, why not? Why is possession so hard to believe? The Western James Bay Area had a community in the 1920s. He met a woman who claimed that she saw strangers who wanted to kill and devour her. Now, this missionary, Sendon, referred to the woman's mental condition as psychoneurosis. But was it really? I mean, really? She hadn't displayed any previous psychosis prior to this, just up one day and said she saw this creature that wanted to kill her. But why only in certain places, and not just one account, but many accounts? So you're telling me that there are many people with this psychoneurosis in just one specific place in one period of time? That just doesn't seem to add up, right? I just don't understand. Oh yes, the Wendigo will prey on the weak, the sick, the dying. I mean, whatever is susceptible to possession and intake of such horrific energies of darkness. Killing lonely travelers or a member of a group, they take on their personality temporarily, kind of meshing with the doppelganger theory, eventually killing other humans that they did encounters. I mean, yes, that can be where people are greedy and they are weakened by their greed. They are weakened by their loss of sight on their moral compass. It's the yin and the yang of energy, the influx, the flow and outflow of good and evil. So even though some people say they serve as a metaphor for the injustices that the indigenous people have faced in Canada, including residential schools, restrictions of rights in the Indian Act, the 60s coup, and similarly assimilative policies. That may be true, but that's not a metaphor for those horrific things that happen to those people, that those are actual events that happen to those people. These are facts. It's not a metaphor. A Wendigo has been around way before any of these laws or rights or, injustices were Now, I've never heard of the Bodum War. Now, what is, or the Lambton worm. So, is a myth of a legend of a country term in northern England. The story takes place around the river where it is one of the area's most famous pieces of folklore, having been adapted from written and oral tradition into pantomime and song formats. So what is the legend? So it revolves around this man, John Lambton, an heir of Lambton Estate, County Durham, in ceremonial Dinanware, and his battle with the giant worm dragon that had been terrorizing the local villages. Well, where did this worm or dragon originate from? Well, John was a rebellious man who missed church one Sunday to go fishing in the river Ware. So, John receives warnings from an old man or a witch, depending on who tells the story, that no good can come from missing church. So as a way that the church would force people to come, that if they didn't come and praise and listen to their beliefs and their sermons, that they would be taken and killed. They'd be attacked by a large creature. It's considered the devil, the beast of the river, has 9 holes on each side of its salamander-like head. Now, depending on the version of the story, the worm is no bigger than a thumb or 3 feet long. Now, in some rendition, it has legs, while in others it is said to resemble a large snake. Now, I believe that this is less of a cryptid and more of a warning that the church used, or a myth that the church used to actually scare people into going to church and listening to what they wanted them to believe. Personally, I don't know about you, but the 2 cryptids that I find terrifying are the Wendigo, Skinwalker, and the Mothman. Those are by far, right now, the two that I'm most terrified of. Now let's move on to actually stories of people that have had accounts with cryptids. The cornfield demon. I used to work at a cheese factory on the edge of a cornfield in southwestern Minnesota. There were a series of days in the summer of '04 when it was so hot that the milk being delivered to us in trucks would evaporate before we got it. It made work easy. The dearth of milk denied us any actual labor, but management would not let us not come to work. We would show up and mess around all shift. I was working nights at the time. 2 or 3 in the morning I was out on the loading dock watching bats fly around the floodlights. Because I liked being out in the cool night air. The corn was high as my shoulder, about 5'10". As I watched the bats, I happened to look down at the edge of the cornfield. The corn was moving. chunks, legs, then hips, then torso, moving in uncomfortable and non-human-like ways. The shoulders and neck, and finally the head. It would look back into the cornfield, or I felt it was looking back. I had goosebumps all over and a weird feeling in my stomach. I felt sick. I can't really explain it. First I thought it had to be some kind of bird, or I don't know. My brain was trying to rationalize what I was seeing what I was looking at first, but it looked too much like a person. It didn't move like any normal person. Gradually, step by step, it moved towards me. I let my curiosity overrun my fear. I inched towards the edge of the dock, which was raised a few feet off the ground. When I got within a few feet of the edge, the thing looked at me, paralyzing me in my spot. I could not run. I was stuck somewhere between terrified and intrigued, but pulled in by this thing. It moved. Its face still pointed at me. It ratcheted its body in that disconcerting, jerky movement towards the cornfield and went back into it as it retreated. I tried to watch where the corn was moving as it passed, but this time the corn remained perfectly still. I noticed that everything was silent. There were no crickets, no wind, nothing. After that thing retreated into the corn, after a few minutes, and nothing happened, everything came back to life. I never saw it again, even though I waited over an hour for it to return. By Frank Zemko. The Forest Cryptid. My strange story took place on the 26th of September, 2009. My church was on a retreat in Indiana in a forest. The place we stayed at was a small building in the center of the forest. We decided that evening to go out and play in the forest with the other children. We came up with this odd game. We made it up. It was like police. The kids were the police, and we would pick an adult to be the hostage. When we began the game, we had to find the adult hiding in the forest in the middle of the night. We start running around the back of the building. This is when we spotted a tall, dark figure. It was over 7 feet tall, running towards the tree line in a weird movement. There was a small opening with tall grass that went up to your knees. This thing ran with its arms at its side, but long and odd. Then it stopped at the edge of the tall grass, as if to wait for us to get closer. And as children do, our curiosity took over and we chased after it, thinking it was an adult. When we finally got a few yards away, it dove into the grass and started to crawl very fast, snake-like. We all freaked out, but stood there staring at this thing. When it got across the tall grass, it began to climb a tree. I can only explain it as a deformed demon animal, possibly like a cat. When it was climbing, then call this a swamp creature because I can't really describe what else to call it. I was driving on Broadkill Road in Broadkill Beach, Delaware, in July 2007 at dusk. This road borders a thick swamp. Standing on the side of the road by the swamp, my daughter and I both see a creature that we've never seen before. Now it only stood 2.5 to 3 feet tall with long legs, a tan body, a flat, buckish face and long tail, small ears, and looked to be around 30 pounds. My daughter and her friend also saw this same animal the year before around the same area, except it was night. It ran in front of their car. I asked the lady on the Broadkill Beach store about it, and she said she had seen it once when she was dirt biking with her dad in that area years before. Both her and her dad had no idea what it even was. She said we are lucky to have spotted it, as very few people have seen it. We went to the Prime Oak Reserve. This is a swampy area museum, and they had no idea what it could be. I'm just curious if anybody else has seen this creature. So this happened in 1995. I call it the Florida Monster. I was around 9 years old at the time. Practically every other year, my family would take a trip to Florida, go to Disney World, but my mother was tired of that. So that year, we actually did not go to Disney World, my sisters and my dismay. On one of these days, we were on a beach. I don't remember what the beach was called, but the people sitting next to us mentioned it being the bottom tip of Florida. So obviously, Key West. After a while of nothing happening, everybody was either in the ocean or sunbathing silently. A woman sitting to the left of us pointed past us to our right and asked, "What is that?" We all turned and looked to a surprising vacant corner of the beach. There are no people there, but there was something really strange. All of us got up to get a better look, a crowd forming around it. If I had to describe the creature we saw in one word, let's see, it would be cartoon fish, I guess. I will never forget what it looked like. Green and looked like a ball of slime, size of a basketball, and tentacles resting on the ground around it with 2 longer tail-like tentacles sticking out of its back. It's the most bizarre fish I had ever seen, but what made it look cartoon were its eyes. There were stalks that stood a foot off its head, but the eyes looked human and kept looking at us. The strange thing that also caught my attention was its mouth. It never seemed to close, or you expect teeth, or only tooth-shaped fleshy protrusions. Not one, not even the creature seemed scared, and after a while it lazily slithered back into the ocean. 10 witnesses to this thing. One thought was it was a parasite organism for a much larger creature. We don't really know. The Mothman. Well, many people don't believe when I saw one very cold, dry November night. My family and I moved into a new house up on a hill on a little back road. The very small town of Fort Gay, West Virginia. Fort Gay sits right on the east side of Kentucky. The population of my town then was probably just a couple thousand. My family and I were unpacking and not yet put the furniture in its right saw this thing. It had to be over 7 feet tall. I was frozen, entranced by it. I'd never been that scared in all my life. My breathing became shallow. My heart was beating. All I could do was lay there and just stare at it. It was sitting in a tree about 50 feet or so off the ground, another 50 feet from the house across the yard. I laid there for what felt like an eternity. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't blink. What terrified me the most were the big, red, bright, glowing eyes looking dead into mine. I finally worked up enough courage to close my eyes and put my head under the covers when all of a sudden this thing smacked the window, went through the house screaming. There's something outside. I was crying. My mom and dad looked at me and said, "What's wrong with you? You look like you've seen a ghost." My face was snow white, pale. I was sweating. I said, "I do not know what it was, but please go outside. Don't go outside, because there is something horrifying out there." My dad went outside anyway. He came back in and said there was nothing. But I kept yelling, "Yes, there is. Yes, there is." My mom took me back upstairs before she put me to bed. I said, "Look at the window." There was a large crack in the middle of it. Something big had hit that window. I tried to explain to them what I saw and how I felt. They told me I was just crazy and seeing things, but to this day I will not go outside by myself. Even in the day, someone still has to watch me to my car, and I'm a grown adult. I've heard some pretty crazy things going on up on that road, but I never expected to experience anything myself. My husband and I went to the theaters and watched Mothman Prophecies. I was reliving that night all over again as I watched that movie. The way they described the feeling and what they saw was remarkable. My husband looked over at me and said, "Isn't that what you described to me when we first started dating?" I could not speak. After that moment, I knew what I saw. I believe in all hearts of hearts I saw the Mothman. It's just a little odd. I only live 80 miles south of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where all of those deaths happened 37 years ago. It was exactly 2 years to the month when I saw It by Scarlett. Back in September of 2004, I was hiking in the Arashiyama area outside of Kyoto, Japan. I had decided to leave the touristy area and set off alone in a random direction towards the mountains. I found myself on an old trail through the forest. A little while into my hike, I encountered an old man with a long white beard. He carried his staff and was dressed in coarse blue robe, like a peasant out of a samurai movie. He saw me and told me to follow him. Being more curious than anything, I walked after him as he led me deep into the forest. He spoke at length about the beauty of nature, how people cut down trees and polluted the earth, and told me that humans must learn to protect and respect nature. During the whole exchange, he never spoke about himself, and he never asked any questions about me. After a while, he turned around and said to me he had to leave and showed me another trail, saying I should take it when I wanted to go back to the city. He then left by that very trail. I happened to pass the same place on the way back that evening. I took the trail the old man showed me Only minutes later, I ended up completely lost and couldn't find the trail itself to retrace my steps. Darkness was setting in. I shone my flashlight around. I noticed an old white fox watching me from nearby. I could have sworn it was watching me with an amused look on its face, but as soon as my light shone on it, it ran off into the bushes. I remember reading all sorts of old Japanese stories and legends about fox spirits that can take human form, and I feel like I might have seen one that day. I did make it out eventually alive. So I am a police patrolwoman in Portsmouth, England. I am a very logical, reasonable human being. I'm frequently confronted with situations that are both bizarre and unnerving. However, the incident occurred on the 25th of November last year. This incident is by far the most unusual of them all. During a routine speed camera set up in the city around 6:30 p.m., at which time it was completely dark, our speed camera picked up a random tracing of non-existent objects hurling past at 30 to 40 miles per hour. The devices are not known to malfunction. We trained the camera on the road surf to see what we picked up. Sitting in the back of the patrol van, we were shocked to discover on the screen that the camera was picking up what only can be described as human figures running up and down the street, approximately 40 feet away from our vehicle, only barely visible through the night vision filter. They were of average height, had a silvery hue, and were sprinting up and down the central reservation, the dividing surface between two opposite lanes on a motorway, repeatedly and extremely fast. I admit I could not exit the vehicle to investigate, but apparently I did not have to. Only about 10 feet away at the side of the road, one of these silvery entities just appeared on the screen. Female, approximately 6 foot, standing motionless, facing away from the van. She was dressed in scantily clad clothing, not unlike that of a young woman on an evening out. I was extremely freaked, especially considering that leaning out of the window, there was absolutely no evidence of anyone standing that close to the vehicle. As the first vehicle, only 5 minutes from the first sighting, drove past, all visible evidence of the entities had vanished. Nothing occurred from that time to the end of my duty at 9 p.m. And yet when I played back the footage from the camera, the silvery objects and the woman were not on the tape. I was not the only person to see it. A few officers and friends saw it, but we did not report the incident. It was just too bizarre. I was driving on a back road in Ohio, and I am prone to seeing dark creatures in the night, figures, spirits, passed by, I could feel the air change, the energy shift. It was so dark and heinous. I could feel it eating away into my soul, is the best way to describe it. I held my breath and focused on the road until I felt the feeling pass and the energy turn back to normal. I've only seen that 2 other times, and both times were not a good outcome. One was a friend that had committed suicide, and another was a murderer. A man that had murdered his wife and hung her in the basement right down the street where I lived. So those are the stories that I have for tonight in the legends and myths and truths about cryptids. You can believe or not believe, but there is some truth in fiction, and not all cryptids are born out of folklore or hysteria or of the church's rumors. Some, I believe, are real. Intense dark energy that